Tonight we travel back to a time when dinner was cooked over open flames. Teeth were brushed with twigs, if at all, and toilet paper never heard of it. You're about to enter the world of medieval hygiene where comfort is optional and privacy is a myth. It's dark, damp, and if we're honest, kind of smells like regret. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop your location and local time in the comments. I always love seeing where and when you're tuning in from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're barefoot on cold dirt. Your breath fogs in the air, and your cloak sticks to your skin. The chamber was warm barely, but outside everything is stone and frost and the creak of old wood. It's the middle of the night, and nature has called not politely. There's no bathroom indoors. You stumble through the courtyard toward the little wooden shed behind the goat pen. It's called a privy, and tonight it feels very far away. You step carefully, avoiding mud, or what you hope is mud. Someone left the door ajar, so at least you don't have to fumble with the latch. Inside, the air is still. A wooden bench with a hole cut into it awaits your courage. Beneath it, a pit that has seen things, smelled things, been many things. There's no candle, no toilet paper, just you, the hole, and a small stack of hay, possibly moss. You reach for it and realize too late it's damp. Mainstream historical fact. Most medieval homes, even among the wealthier class, used outdoor pit latrines or chamber pots. Indoor toilets didn't catch on for centuries, and even then, they were often little more than a bench over a shaft. You try not to breathe too deeply. The cold keeps some of the worst of it at bay, but it also freezes your thighs to the seat, which is more log than bench. You do your business as quickly as you can, though nothing feels clean, and wipe with something that might be straw, but could honestly just be shredded roofing. As you leave, the breeze shifts. You catch a whiff of something sharp and sour and ancient, like rot and vinegar and damp wool. That's not the privy, it's you. You didn't realize how much paper mattered until now. But paper was expensive, handcrafted from linen rags or wood pulp if you were lucky, and certainly not made for wiping what you just wiped. There's a vague smear of warmth on your hand, a smear that makes you want to weep. A fringe historical tidbit: in some regions, it wasn't uncommon to reuse cloth rags that would be washed and dried between uses shared between family members. Think of it as the medieval version of a family subscription plan. One wipe fits all. You trudge back to your straw-stuffed mattress. The goats snore, the roof drips, and your fingers itch not from disease, but from shame. You wonder who invented this system, who decided that digging a hole and balancing over it in the dark was a viable long-term solution. Historians still argue whether the shift to outdoor privies was about sanitation or simply about keeping unclean acts away from living spaces. But one thing is clear: it didn't smell better either way. As you lie there itchy and half traumatized, you think about the rich, the nobility. Surely they had it better. They did, slightly, but we'll get to their stone thrones soon enough. For now, you drift off slowly, hoping that when morning comes it brings soap. Spoiler, it won't. Section 2, leaves, moss, and shells. You wake at dawn to the sound of hooves in mud and someone shouting about chickens. Your back aches from the straw mattress, and your hands still smell faintly of last night's regret. The good news: it's a new day. The bad news: you still have to go to the bathroom, and now it's light enough to see what you're wiping with. This morning, you decide to upgrade your experience. No more mystery moss, no more potentially used hay. You venture out in search of options. And here's where you learn something essential about life in the Middle Ages. If it grows, it wipes. You start by examining the ground near the garden. Large leaves, too slippery. Small leaves, useless. Thorny leaves, a literal pain. You finally find a broad dock leaf that feels absorbent. Not luxurious, but definitely an improvement over the mossy roulette of the previous night. Historical fact. In Europe, people wiped with whatever they could find. Leaves, straw, hay, sheep's wool, and smooth stones were all common. In coastal areas, mussel shells and even handfuls of sand were used, though the latter sounds more like exfoliation by punishment. Of course, not everyone had gardens or access to clean leaves. That's where moss came in plentiful, soft, and surprisingly popular in damp climates. Birch bark tried it once, never again. You test a few items on your hand, light pressure, no folding, and decide dock leaves are the winner. You bring a handful back to your latrine like a proud squirrel returning from a quest. Quirky tidbit. The Vikings apparently used wool soaked in salt water. Roman soldiers, they used a sponge tied to a stick shared communally and rinsed in vinegar between uses. It was called a tersorium, and it's the reason you may never trust a public toilet brush again. Back at the bench with a hole, you sit a little more confidently today. The morning sun filters through the warped slats of the door and the light reveals movement. Spiders. One in each corner. You pretend not to see them. You finish your business and use the leaves. It's not terrible. One leaf rips. You panic. Then breathe. Then reach for another. Your standards have shifted dramatically in just 12 hours. When you return to the house, someone asks if you washed your hands. You stare blankly. With what soap in medieval times was not the bubbly lavender-scented bar you know today. It was homemade, often from lard and wood ash. Effective, sure. Pleasant, no. Most peasants didn't use it regularly. Water was usually enough if you were lucky enough to have clean water. Historians still argue whether the average medieval person understood germ theory in any form. Spoiler, they didn't. But they did associate filth with sin, and that meant spiritual cleanliness often took precedence over literal hygiene. You could stink, but if you didn't lie or steal, you were pure. You pass the pigsty and wave to your neighbor who's squatting by a tree. There's no shame here. Everyone goes. Everyone knows. No stalls, no doors, no embarrassment. Just squatting and avoiding eye contact. You pause at a small patch of moss by the fence. Soft, cushiony, slightly damp from dew. You pocket a tuft for later like someone collecting rare coins. Later that afternoon, you're walking through the market. The cobblestones are slick with waste, and you step carefully dodging puddles that might contain anything. You glance at a boy selling baskets of sheep's wool, some of it dyed, some raw. You think that might actually feel nice. But you keep walking, because you're not ready to be that person yet. A man selling apples sneezes violently into his hand, wipes it on his apron, then offers you a sample. You decline, politely, then keep walking. You realize slowly that everyone smells a little, like smoked sweat old bread and thyme, and nobody notices. This is just how things are. You pass a woman emptying a bucket of brown water into the gutter. A dog sniffs it. You keep your mouth closed tightly. Breathing only through your nose now feels like a precious skill. You think about the dock leaves in your belt pouch. You've become someone who has a favorite leaf for wiping. This is who you are now. And honestly, it's not the worst thing. Section 3. Public privies and judgmental geese. You learn quickly that privacy is not a medieval luxury. It's not even a concept. especially when it comes to relieving yourself. Mid-morning, you follow a cluster of people heading toward what looks like a low stone shed built into the side of a public square. You're curious. Curious is always dangerous in the Middle Ages, but you follow anyway. As you approach, the smell hits you first. Then the sounds, footsteps, conversations, the occasional splash. Someone singing, loudly, off-key. You step inside. It's a public latrine, a communal toilet, a long bench with evenly spaced holes, no dividers, and absolutely no shame. Men and women sit side by side, chatting, grunting, doing what must be done. Some read. One person is knitting. Another is eating an apple. You try not to look directly at anyone, but that only makes you look suspiciously like you're doing something worse. You choose an end hole and sit knees awkwardly close to the person beside you, who immediately strikes up conversation about the weather. You nod. You would give anything, your cloak, your dignity, your soul, for a stall door. Historical fact. Public latrines like this existed throughout medieval towns, especially in densely populated areas. In London, the infamous long drop over the river Fleet allowed dozens to sit in a row and let gravity do the work. No partitions, no plumbing, just woodstone and hope. As you shift uncomfortably, something hisses behind you. You freeze. Slowly, you look over your shoulder and spot the culprit, a goose. A large one. White feathers, dead eyes, standing guard by the entryway. It honks once low and menacing and resumes patrolling. Fringe tidbit. In some towns, animals like pigs and geese roamed freely even in latrines because they helped clean up scraps. Of course, they also bit chased and traumatized unsuspecting users. There are even records of people losing fingers to aggressive geese while mid-wipe. You clench instinctively. Your neighbor laughs. That one's Crumpet. He likes toes. You don't respond. You just finish and leave as quickly as medieval decency allows, which is to say, not quickly enough. Outside, the air smells only faintly better. You take a deep breath anyway. You walk through a street lined with pails and puddles, each one a little mystery. A child waves at you with both hands, covered in something you really hope is chocolate. You pass an alley and spot two men arguing over a bucket of what looks like diluted urine. One man gestures furiously at a leather strip. The other holds up a shoe. You keep walking. Later, you ask someone about it. They explain that urine, yes. Actual human urine was used in tanning leather and cleaning cloth. They call it chamber lye, and it's collected from public privies for resale. You try to forget this, but you can't. You return to your lodging in time for a quick meal, stale bread, a knob of cheese, and something vaguely fish-shaped. You eat, then feel the rumble in your gut. No, not again. You consider holding it. You really do. But your dignity is already on life support. You venture back toward the communal latrine only to find it locked for cleaning. A woman nearby points around the corner. There's another down that alley, she says, but watch out for the goose. You round the corner. There he is. Crumpet. Standing proud on the threshold like a soldier guarding a holy relic. You sigh, tighten your cloak, and charge. Crumpet honks. You dodge. He pecks. You spin. Your dignity doesn't make it, but you do. Inside, you sit panting. A man to your left offers you a turnip. You decline, but you thank him. It's the first nice thing anyone's done for you all day. Historians still argue whether these communal latrines were truly communal by cultural preference or just lack of infrastructure. Some believe the lack of privacy made hygiene worse. Others suggest it fostered a sense of openness and practicality. Either way, there were no stalls, and geese were real. As you leave limping slightly from your battle wound, it's fine. Just a scrape, you realize you're no longer shocked. You're adapting. You're becoming medieval. It's terrifying, but it's also kind of freeing. Section 4. Castle toilets and gravity tricks. By mid-afternoon, the village is buzzing, literally. Flies drift lazily through the warm air, congregating around windowsills, animal pens, and yes, latrines. You've grown used to swatting at them absent-mindedly, though you're never quite sure whether they're landing on you out of affection or suspicion. Today, you're invited to visit the manor on the hill. A cousin of a cousin works in the kitchen, and they've promised you a peek at the noble conveniences. You climb the winding path, half expecting to see golden basins and perfumed linens. At this point, you'd settle for anything that doesn't bite back. The manor looms above you, stone ivy and stern wooden doors. You're ushered in quickly, past great halls and fire-lit chambers, until you reach a corridor lined with tall, narrow windows. And then the toilet. They call it a garderobe, which sounds fancy until you see it. A wooden bench built into a small stone room with a hole straight through the floor. No plumbing, no magic, just gravity and a long drop. Historical fact: garderobes were common in castles and large manors. The waste would fall into a cesspit or directly into the moat below. In winter, the smell was less unbearable. In summer, the moat became a festering soup of waste and wildlife. You lean forward to peer down the hole. It's deep, very deep. You can't see the bottom. You think you hear something splash, or maybe slither. Either way, you step back. The bench is polished smooth from centuries of use. You sit cautiously. It creaks. A breeze rises from the shaft below, surprisingly warm, alarmingly fragrant. You blink. Your host knocks gently and offers you a cloth square. It's damp, slightly oily, smells like lavender and vinegar. For wiping, they say. The master insists. You nod, stunned. This is by far the most luxurious moment you've had since arriving in the Middle Ages. A real cloth. A scent. Not moss. Not bark. You feel honored and mildly suspicious. Quirky tidbit. Some garderobes were positioned above the castle's outer walls so that waste would drop outside the walls, entirely doubling as passive defense. Raiders approaching the castle might find themselves literally dumped on. Siege warfare met sewage management. You finish and rise. There's a small basin nearby filled with cloudy water and a bar of yellowish soap. You wash your hands grateful, then notice something carved into the stone wall. A series of tally marks. You stare. Someone was counting. Days wipes lives lost to bad lunches. No one knows. You descend the stairs and thank your guide. Outside, a servant whispers to you, "Don't walk too close to the moat." You glance down and realize the water is greenish, thick, moving. You back away slowly. Historians still debate whether garderobes were ever truly effective at keeping things clean. Some argue they simply relocated the smell to the outside. Others believe they were an early attempt at architectural sanitation, but all agree they weren't foolproof or rat-proof. As you walk away from the manor, you feel a strange mix of envy and pity. The nobles had elevation, cloth, scent, but they also had pits of waste beneath their bedrooms and summer nights full of buzzing horror. Comfort and consequence always paired. You pass a group of children playing near a stream. One is stirring something with a stick. You don't ask. Instead, you return to your own corner of the village, to your leaf stash and your goose trauma with a strange new pride. You've sat on a lord's toilet. You've survived the wafting moat. You've held a lavender-scented wipe in your own two hands, and you didn't drop it. Progress. Section 5. Monk Scrolls and the Sin of Smearing. It's early evening now. The sun dips low, casting long shadows across the village square. Somewhere in the distance, a bell tolls slow and hollow, as if even sound is tired. You follow its echo toward the monastery. You're not here for prayer, though that wouldn't hurt. No, tonight you're here to observe a different kind of ritual. What happens when cleanliness collides with scripture and a serious lack of paper? You're ushered in quietly. A monk in rough wool robes nods at you, then leads you down a narrow hall that smells of beeswax and damp stone. You pass rows of cells, tiny rooms with nothing but beds of straw, and shelves stacked with parchment scrolls. And eventually, you reach the cloister's most sacred and secret place, the scriptorium. This is where books are copied by hand letter, by painstaking letter. Ink is precious. Parchment, even more so. Every page scraped from the hide of a sheep or calf takes days to prepare. And yet in the adjacent chamber, the latrine, some of those same pages have met a far less dignified fate. You sit silently listening. Two monks nearby are deep in debate. One insists that an old miscopied hymn scroll is no longer sacred and can be used as needed. The other is horrified. That was the word of God, he whispers, even if it rhymes poorly. Historical fact. In some monasteries, when scrap parchment or old texts were deemed unusable, they were occasionally repurposed for hygiene in latrines. It was rare and scandalous, but in places where even moss was in short supply, necessity often outweighed theology. You peek into the small latrine chamber. It's cool, windowless, and by medieval standards, immaculate. A stone bench with a chute beneath it, a wooden shelf holding folded cloths, and a single candle burning steadily in the corner. On that shelf among the cloth, a sliver of parchment stained, folded, and suspiciously familiar in shape. You step closer. It's a piece of a psalm, smudged, illegible, torn at the edges. Someone wiped with the Book of Psalms. You're not sure if that's sacrilege or simply the darkest kind of recycling. Quirky tidbit. Some monastic rules forbade the use of cloth for wiping altogether, stating that only the left hand and water should be used to promote humility and reduce worldly indulgence. One Benedictine abbot even issued a rule about not befouling that which might be read. Back in the scriptorium, a young monk sneezes and drops a scroll. It unrolls dramatically across the floor like a medieval red carpet, except this one details agricultural tithes and possibly plowing techniques. The others groan. One mutters, "That's going to the privy for sure." You wonder how many great works of medieval theology have been accidentally erased by the digestive system. Probably more than you'd guess. You follow your guide into the library proper. The smell changes, less mold, more dust and ink. Shelves upon shelves of knowledge line the room, most chained in place. You gently touch one of the bindings and notice a tiny smear, brownish old and ominous. You pull your hand back. You're told proudly that the monks here also make their own ink from gall nuts and iron salts. You nod impressed and make a mental note never to ask about the source of their dye for red pigment. You've seen things. You don't want to know more. Historians still argue whether the use of religious or scholarly texts in latrines was a rare act of desperation or a surprisingly common practice hidden under layers of medieval modesty. Some scholars point to evidence of scroll fragments found in cesspits. Others argue such incidents were anomalies, accidents, not habits. You exit the monastery just as the last light fades. The sky is streaked with orange and ash. The bell tolls again, signaling evening prayer. You glance back, half expecting the parchment to follow you like a guilty thought. But no, just shadows, the flicker of candlelight, and the quiet rustle of robes. You walk home slowly, mind spinning. Tonight you wiped with a leaf, saw a goose guard. A bathroom stared into a noble's moat latrine and witnessed Holy Scripture meet an unholy end. You've passed some kind of threshold. You are no longer simply surviving the Middle Ages. You're learning its logic. Terrible, chaotic, compost-scented logic, and somehow it's starting to make sense. Section 6. Chamber pots and window dumps. By the time the stars blink into view, the village has gone quiet mostly. The fire in the hearth is dying, your stomach is grumbling faintly from dinner, a broth-like something with a questionable turnip, and all you want is sleep. But your bladder has other plans. You reach for your cloak and sigh. Again, you consider just using the chamber pot in the corner. That's what it's there for, after all. A wide, squat ceramic bowl with a faint crack and a smell like someone tried to trap a ghost in vinegar. It's not dignified, but it's indoors. That alone feels modern. You lift the lid and hover. The sound echoes embarrassingly. You swear the pot chuckles. You finish, carefully replace the lid and stare at your options. Now what? No one talks about what happens after the chamber pot is used. But here's the secret. Someone has to dump it. Usually that someone is you. You brace yourself, lift it gingerly, and step outside into the cold. The night air wraps around you like a wet bedsheet. A stray cat watches you from a rooftop. Judgmental. You head to the back alley where a designated dumping trench called a cess trench waits. It's basically a long, narrow ditch filled with waste. You pour slowly, hearing the splash, the hiss, and the faint sigh of something very old and very smelly being reawakened. Historical fact: chamber pots were common across all classes, often kept under the bed. In urban areas, waste was thrown into gutters or trenches, sometimes directly into the street. Laws were passed requiring people to shout warnings before emptying pots from upper windows. Most people didn't. Back inside, you wash your hands in a basin of grayish water that's probably seen things you'd rather not know about. No soap, just a cold splash and a lot of denial. You try to sleep. But somewhere outside, someone else is emptying their chamber pot. The splashing sound is unmistakable. You stare at the ceiling, then the walls, then the floor. You begin to notice just how many smells can coexist in one room. Damp wool, burnt tallow, mold, latrine-tinged air wafting up from the floorboards. You finally drift off, only to be jolted awake by a sudden noise like water hitting stone. You look toward the open window, and there, silhouetted by moonlight, is a woman on the second floor across the alley. She's tipping something out the window. A stream arcs, then splashes onto the street below. You hear a man shout, probably the one hit. You close the shutters, tightly. Quirky tidbit. In some towns, the cry "Gardy-loo" was shouted before emptying waste from a window. It likely comes from the French "Regardez-le watch," out for the water. Though most recipients of said warning claimed it never came in time. You lie awake, pondering the physics of airborne urine. You think about umbrellas, how odd they must have seemed at first. Who needs a hat for rain that smells like stew, and yet someone somewhere saw a problem and thought there has to be a better way. You now see the world through chamber pot goggles. Every balcony is a threat. Every open window a loaded trap. You start categorizing houses by risk level. Sloped eaves are safer. Tight alleys are danger zones. Stone thresholds should be avoided after sunset. Your instincts sharpen. Your dignity dulls. Historians still argue whether the lack of centralized waste disposal in medieval towns contributed more to disease or to urban resilience. Some point to high mortality rates. Others note how community-managed cesspits and trench systems reflected early public health thinking. Either way, it didn't smell good. One day you ask the old woman next door how she deals with the nightly dumping. She shrugs. You learn to walk in the middle of the street, she says, and always carry a hood. You thank her. It's the most useful thing anyone's told you all week. As the fire dies and your eyelids grow heavy, you wrap yourself tightly in your blanket, nose tucked deep, and whisper your new nighttime prayer. Let no window open above me. You're not sure who might hear, but in the Middle Ages, that prayer just might count. Section 7. Wiping in the Wild. You wake before sunrise wrapped in scratchy wool and a deepening sense of resignation. Your breath fogs the air. Someone is snoring nearby, a deep, wheezy snore that speaks of age ale and decades of not brushing teeth. Today, you're traveling. Not far. Just to the next village. But even a short journey in the Middle Ages requires planning courage. And as you now know, a clear understanding of your wiping strategy. There are no rest stops, no public toilets with flushing stalls and little hooks to hang your satchel. There is only the road, the woods, and whatever nature provides, if it's generous. You pack what you can, some bread, a wedge of cheese, your water flask, and your new most prized possession, 3 carefully folded dock leaves in a little pouch tied to your belt. You set out just after dawn. The path is muddy, full of cart tracks and hoof prints. You walk carefully not for beauty, but for stability. Slipping in medieval filth is a rite of passage, but not one you're eager to experience again. Hours pass, birds sing. A breeze carries the scent of wet soil, sheep, and something less charming. Your stomach begins to gurgle. You look around. No inns, no latrines. Just a thicket of trees, a cluster of rocks, and your urgent biology. You scan the area. Not too close to the path, don't want to be caught mid-squat. Not too deep into the woods, don't want to be caught by wolves or ghosts. You pick a spot with partial cover and soft moss. You've done this before. You're almost confident. You crouch. You survive. You wipe. You stand victorious. Historical fact. Medieval travelers, pilgrims, and soldiers frequently relieved themselves in the open. There were few facilities along the road, and people often carried cloths or rags for reuse. The church even issued advice for pilgrims on the matter, though it mostly focused on modesty rather than cleanliness. You continue down the road lighter in both spirit and body. You pass another traveler cloaked and weary, who nods politely. You nod back. It's a silent bond. You both know what life on the road requires. You spot a group of pilgrims ahead. They're sitting in a circle, passing around a bowl of porridge and talking softly in Latin or something close to it. One of them gestures toward a tree line and whispers, "Mind the thorns." "We lost Brother Alric to a bramble wipe last week." You wince. Nod. Thank them. Then tuck that warning into your mental file labeled, "Things I didn't want to know but now can't forget." Quirky tidbit. In Iceland, early settlers used clumps of dried sheep dung as emergency toilet paper. It was absorbent, plentiful, and according to one particularly chipper Norse poem, better than nothing but worse than everything. The sky turns overcast. The wind sharpens. You begin to consider the worst-case scenario needing to go when everything is wet. You scout the roadside like a squirrel hunting for treasure. You find a patch of dryish bark and break off a piece just in case. As you walk, a drizzle starts, then rain. You pull up your hood and feel the water slip past your collar anyway. Your boots squelch with each step. The road becomes soup. And then it happens. The second wave. Your stomach protests violently. This is no casual urge. This is now or never. You stumble off the path into a hollow between two hills and do what must be done. Everything is soaked. Leaves stick. Bark splinters. Moss slithers. It's chaos. You emerge 10 minutes later, emotionally weathered. Historians still argue whether personal hygiene deteriorated during long pilgrimages or adapted through necessity. Some suggest travelers became less clean. Others argue they developed routines with cloths, water pouches, and even herbal disinfectants. What's certain is that no one emerged from a pilgrimage looking or smelling better than when they started. You reach the next village by dusk, wet, sore, and slightly traumatized, but proud. A boy offers to take your boots for cleaning. You shake your head. No one needs to witness what your boots have endured. You finally settle by a fire, drying your cloak, your socks, and your soul. You've defecated in the wild, learned the dangers of thorns, and survived wiping in a thunderstorm. You are no longer merely a visitor to the past. You are now a participant. Congratulations. Also, never travel without extra leaves. Section 8. Royal Bums and the Groom of the Stool. You've barely had time to thaw from your wild roadside adventure when the rumors begin. A royal procession is passing through town. Nobles, horses, trumpets. Possibly someone who's been in a bath in the past week. By the time they arrive, the village has gathered like moss around a warm stone. Banners flutter, drummers thump. Children smear their faces trying to peek through the crowd. You wedge yourself between a barrel and a goat to get a look. And there he is, the king's cousin's advisor's something or other. Not actual royalty, but close enough to have silk sleeves and a clean neckline. And behind him, riding on a sleek black horse posture, like a painting, the king's groom of the stool. You blink. You've heard the rumors. That this man knows the king better than his wife. That he dines in private chambers and speaks in hushed tones. That his actual job title involves the royal rear. You follow the procession until they pause in the manor courtyard. You slip through the side, pretending to be very interested in a sack of flour. And then, like fate handing you an oddly shaped gift, you overhear a stable boy whisper, "They brought the traveling commode." You freeze. This you have to see. Historical fact. The groom of the stool was a real royal position in England, most prominent during the Tudor period. His role was to attend the monarch during toileting, helping undress, providing cloths, and assisting with hygiene. Far from humiliating, it was a position of immense trust and political influence. You sneak around the back of the manor, where two servants are unpacking something that looks like a chair, but boxier. It's richly carved, inlaid with ivory, and has a padded lid. When opened, there's a velvet-lined hole in the center and a porcelain chamber beneath. The traveling throne. You gape. This is not a pit in the earth. This is not a spider-laced bench. This is furniture. Regal, portable, deeply unsettling furniture. A man in blue approaches, wiping his hands with perfumed cloth. He is immaculately clean. He smells like rosewater and authority. This is him, the groom. You expect embarrassment. He offers only confidence. He nods to the commode. "It travels with us," he says casually. "The king prefers consistency." You ask hesitantly about the job. He smiles. His Majesty appreciates discretion and warmth. The cloth is steamed. The bowl is checked. We record frequency. You blink. You keep notes. He taps his chest. Digestive health is national security. Quirky tidbit. The groom of the stool often wielded incredible influence. Because he spent time alone with the king in unguarded, vulnerable moments, he became confidant gatekeeper and sometimes policymaker. Historians speculate that more than one diplomatic decision was made mid-wipe. You watch as the commode is carried gently into the manor. It vanishes behind thick curtains and guards. You linger, brain spinning. Someone is paid well to manage wiping for a monarch. Not just wiping. Heating cloths, monitoring smells. reporting on stool texture like it's classified intelligence. Historians still argue whether the groom's role was truly respected by courtiers or quietly ridiculed. Some accounts depict it as the ultimate honor. Others suggest it was a gilded embarrassment. Either way, the groom sat closer to power than most could dream. You return to your corner of the village, where your toilet is still a bench with ambition. You look at your moss stash and feel the sting of class disparity. And then, because fate enjoys irony, you find yourself needing to go. You imagine the velvet lid, the porcelain bowl, the heated cloth. You sigh, you use a leaf. As you squat beside the goat shed, you hear the drums start up again in the distance. The royal party is leaving, traveling to the next town, taking the portable toilet with them, taking the groom, taking the steam-heated cloths. You pull your cloak tighter, you finish with dignity. Then just before you walk away, you whisper softly to the goat, "Digestive health is national security." She blinks. Choose a bit of rope. You nod. She understands. Section 9. Diseases, dirt, and denial. You don't notice the coughing at first. It's background noise, just part of the daily medieval soundtrack, like creaking carts or drunk monks humming off-key. But as the days go by, the coughing grows louder. More people are sneezing. Someone collapses in the market. A child's face is flushed and too still. Then comes the bell, not the church bell, not the work bell, the other one, the plague bell. Someone's died. You feel it before you understand it. An invisible shift in the air, heavier, somehow damp with fear. People walk faster. Windows stay shuttered. And suddenly everyone is paying very close attention to smells. You overhear it in whispers, "Bad air brings death." They don't say germs. They don't know about viruses or bacteria. They say miasma, foul, poisoned air, which means people start doing the only thing they know how to do in times of terror: blame. They blame the butcher's stall, the leper's hut, the unwashed, the stench of latrines and chamber pots. Even your beloved patch of moss gets a side-eye. Historical fact. During outbreaks like the Black Death, many believed disease spread through miasma, the bad air rising from rot and filth. Sanitation improved in some cities simply out of fear, though the true causes of plague, like fleas on rats, remained unknown. You start noticing remedies everywhere. Bundles of herbs tied to doorways. People walking around with dried flowers stuffed in their collars. Some carry oranges spiked with cloves. Others burn lavender or rosemary in their homes, convinced it keeps the death away. One man walks through the street, ringing a bell and shouting prayers, trailing smoke from a pan of burning pitch. You hold your breath when he passes. A woman douses the gutter with vinegar, muttering about demons in the mud. You try to keep your distance, but space is hard to come by when the world is made of narrow alleys and shared air. Your neighbor coughs. You cough, then you don't stop coughing. That night you stay inside. You try not to breathe too deeply. You wipe your face with your sleeve and avoid the chamber pot, as if denying your body will also deny the sickness. Quirky tidbit. Some believed that holding in bodily functions would protect you from illness, that if nothing exited, nothing bad could enter, so people would avoid defecating for days, sweating and bloating in quiet panic. Unsurprisingly, this did not help. You visit the apothecary. It's dim, filled with jars and dried plants, and a man who looks half asleep and half possessed. He gives you a sachet of herbs, tells you to bathe in vinegar, and warns you to avoid the east wind. You do none of those things. Instead, you help dig a trench. People are dying faster now. They don't have time for proper burials. The churchyard is full. So a wide pit is opened at the edge of the village. The gravediggers don scarves soaked in wine and work quickly. You keep your head down and hands busy, hoping that sweat counts as protection. You wash afterward in a basin of cloudy water and soap that smells like regret. You avoid mirrors. There are none, but still you avoid them. Historians still argue whether medieval sanitation practices helped slow plague transmission or made it worse. Some claim latrines and cesspits attracted rats. Others believe open air and rustic habits ironically offered protection to rural villagers over cramped urban populations. Either way, nobody felt safe. You go days without using the public latrine. You avoid chamber pots unless absolutely necessary. You've started wiping with cloth soaked in vinegar, not for cleanliness but as superstition. You don't know if it helps, but the ritual is oddly comforting. Then one night the bell rings again, this time for someone you knew. Not well, but well enough. You remember their laugh, their way of chewing with their mouth slightly open. You remember standing next to them in line for the latrine, both of you pretending the smell wasn't as bad as it was. You sit alone by the hearth, listening to the wind whisper through the cracks in the wall. It smells like damp wood and something unspoken. You clutch your little herb pouch tighter. Tomorrow you'll still have to go. Still have to squat over a hole or a pot or a ditch because nature doesn't pause for grief. But tonight, you wrap your cloak tighter, breathe shallow, and close your eyes. If smells carry sickness, you think maybe silence can carry safety. Section 10. Bathhouse Rules and Slippery Morals. The sickness passes eventually, not because it's beaten, but because it runs out of steam or hosts. The bell rings less, the fear thins, and slowly life resumes. And with it, so does bathing. You hear about it in whispers. At first, a public bathhouse has reopened near the town square. At first, you think it's a rumor. Then you see steam drifting above the tiled roof, and a line of people holding towels and little pouches of herbs. You follow. The inside is dim and humid, lit by flickering oil lamps and warmed by a great stone furnace in the center. Water flows from a spout into a large communal tub. The floor is wet and smells like soap ash and something vaguely floral but suspiciously faint. You step inside and take it all in. The chatter, the bodies, the splash and steam, and the utter unapologetic lack of privacy. Everyone is naked. Well, mostly. Some wear thin linen wraps, some don't bother. There's no gender division, no walls, no cubicles, just stone benches, shallow tubs, and the constant sound of someone scrubbing something. Historical fact. In medieval Europe, public bathhouses were common, especially in cities. They offered not only bathing, but also food, drink, and sometimes other services. While the church periodically condemned them, many remained popular well into the Renaissance. You dip a toe into the water. It's warm, shockingly so. For a moment, it feels like rebirth. Your muscles unclench. Your skin sighs. Then someone farts loudly, and you remember where you are. You find a quiet spot on the edge of a small tub and start washing. A man nearby is vigorously scrubbing his feet with a bundle of dried herbs. Another dunks his entire head under and emerges looking born again. A woman offers you a pinch of ash soap. You nod gratefully and begin rubbing it on your arms. It's gritty, but it lathers barely. Better than moss. Definitely better than turnip water. Quirky tidbit. Some bathhouses offered special scraping services where a worker would use a curved blade called a strigil to scrape dirt and dead skin off your body. They'd sometimes offer delousing as well, which was not a metaphor. You glance up and notice two people seated near the furnace talking in hushed tones. One is a merchant, the other a local official. They pass a wine flask and speak of land deals, grain shipments, and the price of wool. You realize the bathhouse is also a business hub, a gossip chamber, a social club where everyone's pants are optional. You finish washing and step into the steam room, a low-arched chamber where the heat presses against your lungs like a second skin. A monk is seated cross-legged in the corner, eyes closed, face shiny with sweat. You nod respectfully. He does not nod back. You sit, you sweat, you listen. A teenage boy whispers that he once saw a ghost in this room, appeared from the steam, cursed him in Latin, then vanished. His friend laughs and points out the boy doesn't know Latin. He replies, "Exactly." You stay longer than you meant to, partly because it feels like safety, partly because for the first time in weeks, you don't smell like despair. Eventually, you wrap yourself in your damp linen and step back into the night air. You are warm, clean, mostly. But as you turn the corner back toward your lodging, you realize something terrifying. You have to go. Now. You dart into an alley, heart pounding. No leaves, no cloth, no moss, just a stone wall and a sense of urgency that could rewrite history. You crouch, you survive, and then you remember something. You have one last scrap of ash soap in your pouch. You use it, right there. Improvised medieval bidet. Not glamorous, but innovative. Historians still argue whether bathhouses improved health or worsened it during plague times. Some suggest hot water and shared tubs spread disease. Others point out that regular bathing reduced lice and infection. The Church's frequent condemnation of bathhouses might have had more to do with moral panic than medical concern. You return home damp and deeply humbled, but also kind of proud. You've navigated medieval public bathing, avoided unsolicited toe conversations, and invented a hygiene hack worthy of future empires. And most importantly, you don't smell like boiled onions anymore. Section 11. The privileged and the poxed. You thought you were getting the hang of things. You'd survived goose attacks, moss mishaps, and even a thunderstorm wipeout. But nothing quite prepares you for what happens when the class divide hits your backside. It begins with a dinner invitation. Not for you, of course. You're just a bystander. But your host, an old cousin's wife's brother or something equally medieval, works at a manor down the road. He's serving at a noble's banquet and needs help cleaning up afterward. You say yes, mostly because they promise warm bread, but also because curiosity is a powerful thing. The manor is alive with candlelight and silk. The air smells like roasted meat and spiced wine. You try not to gawk. You fail. After the feast, you're sent to the side chamber, the place where the real business happens. Not politics, not secrets, relief, the noble's private toilet. And you see it a marble seat carved into the wall, cushioned with embroidered linen surrounded by fine tiles. A shelf beside it holds tiny cloths, each one pre-folded, slightly damp and faintly scented with rosewater. You blink. Your peasant brain glitches. Historical fact. While most people in the Middle Ages used leaves, moss, or communal cloths, the wealthy sometimes had access to soft wool linen or even perfumed rags for personal use. Some had their own attendants dedicated solely to toileting needs, especially in royal or noble households. You watch in silent awe as a maid carefully replaces the used cloth with a fresh one from a sealed box. Another carries away a small porcelain bowl of wash water. No buckets, no pit latrine, just elegance and incense. And then someone brings out a fan, a literal fan, to cool the noble while they sit. You excuse yourself politely and go outside where a few servants are squatting behind the woodpile. One of them shrugs when you join them. We don't get the rose water, he says, but the pine cones build character. You nod painfully. Quirky tidbit. In some courts, nobles carried small silver or ivory toilet implements, not for surgery or grooming, but for cleaning. One French duchess reportedly had monogrammed wiping cloths that were washed, pressed, and reused like a grotesque form of family stationery. As you squat in the shadows, you start thinking about dignity, about how it doesn't come from marble or fans or perfume. It comes from surviving cold moss and warm shame. It comes from learning to aim in the dark while pretending you're fine. You don't envy the noble exactly, but you do wonder how many people it takes to keep one person clean. Back inside, you're handed a tray of dirty cloths to rinse. You hesitate. The maid shrugs. Better than emptying the pot. She's not wrong. You learn the system cloths are soaked in herbal water, then scrubbed, boiled, and dried in the sun. It takes an entire morning. You help hang them on the line, flinching when one brushes your cheek. You watch as the noble's horse is led past. It's cleaner than you. Probably smells better too. Historians still argue whether the upper class's access to hygiene materials made them healthier or simply more perfumed. Some believe the wealthiest were still prone to infection and disease, as scented cloths don't kill bacteria. Others argue their access to privacy and laundering helped prevent some of the worst outbreaks. You leave the manor with warm bread, slightly damp hands, and a new appreciation for your humble, leaf-based routine. Back at your lodging, you squat over your regular hole and look at your little pouch of moss and bark like it's treasure. It's not rose water, it's not marble, but it's yours, and you haven't had to iron it. Section 12. Toilet Tech Fails of the Renaissance. You're sitting by the hearth one morning enjoying a rare moment of stillness. No errands, no chamber pots, no looming geese when you hear a commotion outside. A boy runs past yelling. The fountain's broken again, followed by the distinctive splash of failure. Curious, you follow the sound. What you find is chaos and plumbing, medieval plumbing. At the center of town, a fountain built from stone and blind optimism is gushing water. Not in a graceful arc, mind you, but in sideways jets, angry sprays, and the occasional random blorp from a lower pipe. A barrel is rolling away. Someone is trying to plug the leak with bread. You step back. You've seen enough. Historical fact. Late medieval cities, especially in Islamic regions and parts of Europe, experimented with rudimentary plumbing systems. Gravity-fed aqueducts, lead pipes, and spring-fed fountains all existed, but maintenance was poor, leaks were common, and sanitation was more aspirational than functional. A man with impressive eyebrows and no clear title shouts, "Bring the scoopers." A girl appears with a large wooden ladle. Another starts rerouting the flow into a nearby gutter, where it immediately joins a trickle of suspicious brown water from someone's laundry bucket. You step away quickly. Later that day, you hear about something even stranger. An aristocrat in the next town over has installed a flushing toilet. You nearly drop your bread. A local mason confirms it, a tall tower with a tank, a pulley, and a hole that leads to an underground channel. You ask if it works. He laughs so hard he snorts bread out his nose. Quirky tidbit. Sir John Harington, godson to Queen Elizabeth I, is credited with inventing an early flushing toilet in the late 16th century. It had a water tank and a valve system, and the Queen reportedly used it once. The rest of the court, however, considered it noisy, drafty, and far too complicated to replace a perfectly reliable chamber pot. You find yourself daydreaming about it anyway, a seat that empties itself. Water that obeys levers. A world where you don't have to carry your own shame to the dumping trench. Then you remember the village fountain and the bread. You wander to a carpenter's shed where a few people are gathered whispering about a new idea, pipes made from hollowed logs. They say water can be directed indoors. You imagine warm baths, sink basins, and perhaps just once not having to run through a thunderstorm to go number 2. But when someone tries to test the system by attaching a hollow log to a rain barrel, it floods the house and soaks a cat. The cat hasn't forgiven anyone. Historians still argue whether early plumbing was a technological triumph or a disaster waiting to leak. Some claim it set the foundation for modern sanitation. Others note the toxic effects of lead pipes burst aqueducts and the sheer difficulty of keeping anything clean when the system was powered by gravity luck and rope. You return home and eye your latrine with fresh appreciation. It may be a pit, it may be cold, but at least it doesn't explode. Then again, it also doesn't flush. You spend the evening sketching crude blueprints on a slate pulley bucket counterweight pipe. You get excited. You feel brilliant. You present it to the baker's son. He squints. Why don't you just dig another hole? You stare. He's right, but it hurts anyway. That night it rains. The town fountain burbles again unpredictably. Someone shouts that the public trench is overflowing. You roll over on your straw mattress and mutter, "Flushing." But at what cost? Quirky footnote. Some castles had primitive water closets connected to small drains, but often these emptied into the same moats used for waste. So yes, technically some toilets flushed. Into the moat, where people fished. You fall asleep imagining a toilet that doesn't require bravery, or distance, or prayers. You may not have built it, but the dream has begun. Section 13. Witch marks and bathroom superstitions. You've grown used to the dark, to the groaning floorboards, to the chill of stone against skin, but you still hesitate every time you open the latrine door. Not because of the smell, though it is a committed presence, but because of what's carved into the wood. Strange symbols, circles, stars, odd little squiggles that look like twisted eyes or tangled vines. You first thought they were graffiti, someone passing the time mid-squat, but they repeat, the same ones over and over, like a pattern, like wards. You lean in. There's a series of interlocking loops right above the bench, a small crescent shape tucked near the base, and the faint outline of what looks like a face. You step back. Maybe it's the dark. Maybe it's the stories people tell after a few ales. But suddenly it feels like this toilet is more than just a hole in the ground. It's a portal, or a trap, historical fact. In medieval Europe, people believed that certain parts of the body and certain activities were spiritually vulnerable. Going to the toilet, especially alone and at night, was considered a time when demons or malevolent spirits might strike. Protective symbols were often carved or drawn in latrines to ward them off. You ask the local carpenter about the marks. He shrugs. Witch marks, he says, keeps the bad things out, or in. Then he walks away, not reassuring. You ask the midwife. She nods knowingly and offers you a pouch of dried beans and garlic. Hang it above the door, she says, just in case something follows you home. You ask no one else. Quirky tidbit. Some people carried small charms or amulets specifically for use in the privy. One popular one was shaped like a tiny iron key meant to lock evil spirits away while you were indisposed. Another, a lump of clay with the impression of a saint's foot. That night, as you crouch in the flickering candlelight, you find yourself whispering. Not words, just sound. Something to fill the silence. Something to keep the dark from thinking you're weak. You stare at the carvings. They don't answer. But you feel watched. Not malevolently. More like a concerned grandparent with low standards. You finish quickly and step outside. The wind is sharp. The stars are unusually bright. and from the woods far off, something howls. Nope. You head straight back to your pallet and pull your blanket over your head. The next day, you decide to improve your spiritual security. You carve your own mark clumsily into the frame of your latrine. It's supposed to be a protective spiral. It looks like a snail having an existential crisis. You hang the bean pouch above the door. You place a small pebble inside your belt pouch, something smooth and warm from the hearth. You don't know if any of it works, but you feel safer until someone tells you about the latrine ghost. A traveler, they say, used the wrong bench in the wrong village and was never seen again. Now she haunts toilets across the countryside looking for a proper place to finish her business. If you hear footsteps and no one's there, well, that's her. You laugh it off, nervously. Then 2 nights later you hear footsteps. You freeze. The fire is out. Everyone is asleep. And yet soft, slow, deliberate. Floorboards creaking. You listen. A faint thud outside. You clutch your blanket. Whisper a promise to every saint you can remember. You stay in bed. The next morning, someone says a goat knocked over a bucket. You nod. Sure, a goat. Obviously. Historians still argue whether medieval people truly believed in toilet demons or simply used those stories to explain illness, misfortune, or the inherent discomfort of bathroom time. Some point to consistent symbolism carved into toilet wood across Europe. Others believe the marks were accidental tools resting in soft timber imagination doing the rest. You know what you believe. You carry your pebble. You whisper when alone. You carve your spirals, and every time you sit, you touch wood first. Gently, as if to say, I come in peace, just in case someone or something is still listening. Section 14. A Traveler's Guide to Surviving Medieval Toilets. You're halfway through a week-long journey to a nearby market town part, trade part, curiosity part, desperate search for bread that doesn't crumble like regret. You've packed light a satchel, a worn flask, a bit of smoked fish, and most importantly, your personal sanitation kit. Yes, you have one now. Inside your pouch, 2 folded dock leaves, a scrap of rough linen, a bit of herbal soap wrapped in cloth, and a smooth river pebble for luck, and possibly ghost protection. You are, by all medieval standards, an elite traveler. The road is rough mud ruts, the occasional questionable puddle. You pass pilgrims, traders, and one man pulling a goat in a cart full of cabbage. He waves solemnly. You wave back. You both know the truth. Eventually, nature calls. Loudly. You sigh, scan your surroundings, and duck behind a low stone wall covered in ivy. A few sheep bleat nearby. You offer them a polite nod. Look away, you whisper. You crouch. You wipe. You survive. You also make a mental note, always know your terrain. Historical fact. Long-distance travelers in the Middle Ages often carried cloths, pouches of herbs, or even small wooden paddles to assist with wiping. While these were reused, many were washed in streams along the way. There were no official facilities, just trees, rocks, and faith. You continue walking. A storm threatens in the distance. You pick up the pace. You start mentally drafting your own survival guide, A Traveler's Guide to Medieval Toilets 1. Never sit on a warm stone. It wasn't the sun. 2. Always check for geese, or goats, or judgmental chickens. 3. If the moss is too green, it's probably not moss. 4. Avoid using bark with bugs. Just trust me. 5. In every town, find 2 things: the bakery and the quiet alley behind the tanner's shop. You pause at a crossroads and rest on a log. A merchant joins you, pulling off his boots and muttering about splinters. He offers you a bit of cheese. You accept. In return, you give him your extra leaf. He looks at it, then looks at you. He smiles. You're experienced. You nod. Veteran of 5 latrines and a goose ambush. He nods solemnly. He understands. quirky tidbit. Some medieval towns had communal toilet tokens, bits of wood or bone passed around for those using public latrines to indicate which stalls were in use. They were rarely cleaned. Most travelers preferred the woods. Later, as the storm finally hits you, shelter under a thick oak with a family of weavers. Rain drums the leaves above. A child asks if thunder can make you poop your pants. Her mother answers without missing a stitch. Only if you deserve it. You consider this profound wisdom. That night you reach an inn. It's crowded, loud, and warm. There is one toilet for everyone. A wooden bench in a shed guarded by a rooster with the soul of a warlord. You decide to wait. Inside the inn, you find a spot by the hearth. You sip weak beer and talk to an old woman who once used a hollowed-out pumpkin as a toilet on a mountain pass. You have to angle it just right, she says, with the solemnity of a surgeon. You realize that everyone has a story. A wipe gone wrong, a near miss, a latrine haunted by mice or monks or worse. You go to sleep that night curled near the fire pack tucked under your head pebble in your hand. You've become something you never expected, not just a survivor, but a chronicler, a connoisseur of the crude, a scout of squat spots. Historians still argue whether medieval travelers were truly as resourceful as stories suggest, or if we romanticize their misery. Some accounts speak of careful preparation and ingenious tools. Others describe sheer, unrelenting chaos. The truth is always probably squats somewhere in between. You dream of a clean seat, a private room, a whispering breeze, and a bucket of lavender. And in your dream, you laugh because you know better now. There's no such thing as a perfect toilet, only the next best log. Section 15. The long, slow march to soft paper. You return from the market road, dusty, blistered, and smelling faintly of cabbage stew and determination. But something's changed. Not just your ability to squat without cramping, or your uncanny talent for identifying good, wiping leaves by texture alone. No, this change is deeper. Existential. You're starting to appreciate the long, strange journey humans have made in pursuit of a clean behind. It begins when you visit the apothecary again this time, not for plague herbs, but out of sheer curiosity. He's busy grinding roots, but when you ask about hygiene, he brightens. "Come see this," he says, and pulls out a small box. Inside rags. Not impressive at first glance, but these are cut evenly, washed carefully, and stored with bay leaves to keep insects away. They're for ladies, he says, and those who care about comfort. You ask how often they're reused. He shrugs. Until the color fades or the smell wins. You nod. That tracks. Historical fact. The evolution of toilet hygiene stretched across centuries, cultures, and classes. In Asia, bamboo spatulas and water jars were common. In Islamic regions, running water and left-hand wiping were standard. In Europe, rags, moss, and paper scraps were used until manufactured paper became cheap enough to be expendable around the 19th century. You start hearing whispers of a strange new material coming from China, something soft, white, and purpose-made. Paper not for books or contracts, but for wiping. You're skeptical. Who would waste paper that way? Then again, who would hang cloth above a pit of waste and call it a garderobe? You visit a traveling merchant who confirms it. He's seen it. Whole stacks of it, he says, in little bundles, smoother than wool, doesn't splinter. You gasp. No bark. He shakes his head. No bark. A miracle. Quirky tidbit. In 6th century China, imperial officials used special perfumed paper for hygiene. By the 14th century, mass-produced toilet paper existed long before Europe embraced it. When it finally arrived in the West, it was considered a luxury item. Some early brands advertised themselves as splinter-free. Back at home, you find yourself folding a clean bit of linen, just so tucking it into your pouch like a small act of hope. You hang a new herb sachet by your latrine door. You wipe the spider webs from the seat. You even mutter a little blessing. You've seen what noble bottoms get, what travelers risk, what ghosts possibly haunt. And you've begun to understand that toilet paper, true crinkly perforated rolled up glory, isn't just comfort, it's civilization in sheet form. Historians still debate whether modern toilet paper is an unsung hero of public health or a symptom of excessive consumerism. Some praise its role in improving cleanliness and dignity. Others point to environmental costs and ask, was moss really so bad? You stare at your pouch, your leaves, your cloths, and you realize you've made peace with this strange world. You've learned to navigate it with grace, or at least minimal splatter. And in that moment, you feel a soft breeze through the cracked window. A breeze that doesn't stink. A breeze that smells like change. You lean back, breathe in, breathe out, and smile, because one day, far from now, in a world of plumbing and plush rolls, someone will read about the days before paper, and they won't believe a word of it. But you'll know. You were there. You wiped with bark. And now, your journey ends. The road behind you is soft and strange, littered with leaves and laughter, with quiet victories no one ever talks about, like finding clean moss, dodging judgmental poultry, or mastering the fine art of squatting without tipping. You lie in your straw-stuffed bed, wrapped in rough wool and calm. The fire has faded to coals. The room creaks gently, like an old song hummed by a tired house. Your hands are clean, your feet are warm. The latrine door is shut. There are no footsteps, no geese, no ghosts tonight. You think about how far humans have come from pits and parchment to porcelain and plumbing, from superstition to sanitation, and how through it all we've carried one quiet, universal truth. Everybody goes. It's not glamorous, it's not poetic, but it's real. And sometimes in the hush of night, it's comforting to know that for all our differences, kings, peasants, pilgrims, and goat cart drivers, we've all made the same face, in the same position, under the same sky. So rest now. Your pouch is packed, your moss is dry, your pebble is still warm in your hand. And if you ever find yourself in the dark again, just listen for the whisper of a leaf, the rustle of a cloak, and the quiet laughter of someone who's been there too. If you've stayed with me all the way to the final moments, thank you so much. I hope this strange and slightly smelly journey brought you a smile, or at least made the modern world feel a little cleaner. If you found tonight's story enjoyable, don't forget to leave a little sign, like a comment or a quick tap to subscribe, and ring the bell, so that on future nights we can open another door together to another time, where soap is still a rare luxury. Sleep well, and if you dream of a goose guarding a toilet, stay calm. You wouldn't be the first.